another edition of Center Stage Sweets. Today we are talking about the musical comedy Legally Blonde based on the film by the same title. And today we are making raspberries and cream pink French macarons to honor Elle Woods, the main character of the show. I chose to do a French macaron today because, like Elle Woods, they are light and airy in appearance, but when you get into it, it's a lot more complicated than it looks on the outside. For those who are unfamiliar with the story, it follows young student Elle Woods as she is dumped by her boyfriend because she's not serious enough. And then she follows him to Harvard Law, earning herself a place in the class. And it follows her journey from not being taken seriously as a law student to growing, winning a big case, and becoming valedictorian of her class and learning that that guy was a loser anyways and she didn't need him. So let's get started on baking. So before we get into actually making the macaron, I want to talk about what I call the 3 P's of macaron baking. They are preparation, patience, and precision. So for the preparation, first of all, normally when I do these videos, I pre-measure out all my ingredients just because it saves time in the demonstration. Because timing is so important with this, I highly suggest pre-measuring out all of your ingredients. Another thing you should do in advance is separate your egg whites. You're gonna need 3 egg whites for this recipe. You need to let them come to room temperature. If they don't, your meringue is not gonna form properly. So take them out early, separate them, and give them a couple of hours to really truly come to room temperature. The other piece of the preparation is getting your baking sheets ready to go. So we have on our website this great little template that you can print out. You can get it at centerstagesweets.com. And you put this underneath your parchment paper and you trace out the circles right where the little logos come together. Put a little dot in the center. I'm going to show you in just a second. And it helps you make sure that they're going to come out an even size, so you're not trying to look around after you finish baking them and go, oh, these 2 pieces are approximately the same size just to make a sandwich. So let me show you how it looks. You can see here on our tray, we've already laid it out, and also make sure that you flip over so that the side that you wrote on is not the side that you're piping your food on. Sharpie works best, but you can totally use a pen or a pencil. I've also set up all 3 trays that I'm gonna need. It may not take 3 full trays, but you definitely wanna be ready and prepped to go. So now let's get into the ingredients. In my food processor here, I have 1 cup of almond flour and 1 2/3 cups of powdered sugar. And we're gonna put the dry ingredients through 3 levels of sifting. The first is gonna be through the food processor, and then we're gonna put it through a sifter twice. So with your food processor, whatever kind you have, just wanna pulse it just to kind of get the ingredients smoothed out as much as possible. And the reason we're doing this is that in order to get those macarons with those nice smooth tops, which is kind of what you see when you look at professionally made ones, you have to have really finely ground dry ingredients. So let's give them a little pulse here. And that should do it. This is a pretty powerful food processor, so it doesn't take too long. Now I'm gonna grab my sifter. And we're gonna pass them through for the first time. When you do the sifting, you'll get to a point where not all of the dry ingredients are going to pass through. That almond flour, no matter how fine it says it is, always has bits of it that are just not going to go through. So if you get to a point where there's only about a teaspoon or 2 left and it's just not grinding through, you can dispose of that little bit. But if it's more than that, you gotta keep grinding it through. Again, that's that patience thing that we talked about. So I have about a teaspoon that's not gonna go through, so I'm just gonna pop that into my garbage. And we're gonna sift it yet again. And speaking of sifting, I wanna talk about your choice of sifting equipment. I highly suggest one that has kind of like a mill crank on it like this, or one of the ones that has like a blade that'll sift through it. The blade ones take a little bit longer, the ones you kind of have to squeeze by hand. I like this one because it moves a little bit quicker and it grinds it, versus like a regular sieve that you just have to kind of shake and let the dry ingredients fall out of. It's not gonna help break them down and grind them in the same way. So with this, I highly recommend the kind with a mill crank on it. So we're just gonna pour it back into the sifter. Gotta make sure it goes into the sifter, not off the side. There we go. And round number 2. Our dry ingredients have now gone through the food processor and been sifted twice, so we're gonna set them aside and get started on the meringues. In a metal bowl here, I have 3 egg whites that I've let come to room temperature over a few hours. I highly suggest a metal or a glass bowl when making meringues. Sometimes plastic bowls can hold onto some oils that can kind of mess with the stiffness of the egg whites. So glass or metal is definitely the way to go on this. You got your whisk attachment on your mixer, and we're gonna start on a low speed, and we're gonna slowly increase the speed while we're working, but to start with, we want it on low. And we're gonna go first till we get it so that it's nice and frothy and not translucent anymore. And you'll definitely wanna be patient. This is where that patience comes in. Getting the meringues together does take some time. All right, as you can see, our egg whites are nice and frothy and they're no longer translucent. So to them, we are going to add 1/4 teaspoon of cream of tartar. This is gonna help our egg whites stabilize as we whip up some stiff peaks. I have 1/4 teaspoon of vanilla extract and 1/4 teaspoon of raspberry extract. That's how we're gonna get that nice raspberries and cream flavor going. And again, on a low speed, and we'll slowly start to increase that. I have here 3 tablespoons of granulated sugar, and we're gonna slowly add it in, just sprinkling a little bit over the top of our egg whites at a time, mixing it in, and then once it's fully incorporated, adding the next bit of sugar. Our sugar is incorporated, let's talk about our goal for these egg whites. We're looking to get stiff peaks out of them, and what that means is that when we take our mixer out, the egg whites just stand up, they don't flop over, they just come to a nice point. So if I were to show you right now, if we stopped, when it comes up, it flops over. That's a soft peak. We want a stiff peak, so we're gonna keep going. Again. That's a stiff peak right there. All right, so now we're going to add in 4 drops of food coloring. We're using pink gel food coloring. If you don't have pink, 1 drop of red will do. You don't want to do any more, otherwise it will start to turn red. And I highly suggest using the gel food coloring versus liquid, because the liquid will dilute your egg whites, the gel won't. So just 4 drops. 4. We give it a quick mix, but we don't want to overmix. This is just enough to get the color incorporated. Now it's time to add in our dry ingredients to our meringue. So we're gonna start with about half of the dry ingredients and we're gonna fold them in. And for my Schitt's Creek friends, I'm gonna show you how to actually fold it in. So we're gonna start with about, like I said, half of our dry ingredients and just kind of sprinkle it over the top. And what we mean by fold it in is you're gonna take your spatula. I highly suggest a very firm spatula for this one. You need a rubber spatula. If it's too flimsy, it's not gonna really do the folding work that you need it to. So a harder, more sturdy rubber spatula. So you're gonna scrape along the side of the bowl, pull the meringue from underneath and fold it over the top. Hence the folding. And that, David Rose, is how you fold in the cheese. So we're just gonna work on folding this in until it gets incorporated, and then we'll add in the other part. Now, some people who have worked with meringues before might be going, oh my gosh, you're gonna deflate it. You actually kind of do need to deflate the meringue a little bit in order to get the right texture for your macarons. first part is just about folded in completely, so we're gonna add the second half. And we're gonna keep mixing. This part definitely takes some time, so be patient with it. But also when it's done and it'll be time to move quickly on to the next step. So how you know when your macaron batter is ready to go is you should be able to pick up a portion of it on your spatula and draw a figure 8 across the batter without it breaking. Now, I doubt we are there yet, but just as a test to kind of see, you would kind of slip and see it already broke partway through, so we're not done yet, so we gotta keep going. And if you need to, sometimes pressing it along the sides of the bowl helps to kind of remix it in. Your arm may get tired, so I don't suggest doing this on upper body day. There it is. You want to be able to draw that figure 8. So now that we can do that, we're done. We're not going to keep mixing it. Okay, now that we have completed what they call the macronage stage, which is when you fold your dry ingredients into your wet, we're going to load up our pastry bags. I'm loading up 2 just so that I don't have to stop and refill because my pastry bags are too small to put the whole batter in. So you're going to want to load them up and have your trays nearby because we're going to start plopping the shells down. First things first, we're gonna make little dots on our tray with the batter. This is gonna, underneath the paper, this is gonna help hold the paper in place as you're piping and make sure that your macarons don't move on you. So just a little drop and a press, and a drop and a press. So now we're gonna fill our little drawings. Aim for the little dots that you gave yourselves and just let them fill. So you want to go almost to the edge, but not quite because they will spread just a tiny bit, not a ton. Now that this tray has been loaded, we're gonna take it and we're gonna slam it down on the table a couple times. The purpose of that is to bring any air bubbles up to the surface. And if you see any that didn't come and pop, but you can see them later, you can always poke them with a toothpick. This helps to ensure the nice, smooth, flat tops on our macarons. We're gonna let them sit for an hour before we put them in the oven because we want the tops to be nice and smooth where you can swipe your finger over them without it getting tacky or getting stuck. So we'll see you in an hour. Our macarons have rested now for about an hour, and you can tell that they're ready because you can take your finger across the tops of them, swipe it across, it's solid, nothing comes off on your finger, they're not tacky. That's when you know they're ready to go in the oven. So I've preheated the oven to 320 degrees. We're gonna pop them in for 12 to 14 minutes. Make sure you also only put 1 tray in at a time. This is crucial to make sure that everything gets heated evenly so that they rise and create their little feet that are a signature of macarons. Our last tray has come out of the oven. I let it cool for about 2-3 minutes before trying to remove the macaron shells from the tray. So the best way to remove them is actually to let the parchment paper do the work for you. So be careful, obviously you wanna make sure that your tray is cool enough to handle, but you wanna the first one is always the hardest. So see how we're able to lift up and we're just gonna peel it, let it peel itself off. And then when I bring them over to my wire rack, I make sure to place one with the bottom facing upwards, and then the next one I face with the bottom downwards so that when we fill, it's easy to make the sandwiches. While our macaron shells continue to cool on the wire rack, we're gonna start on our filling. It's gonna be a super simple vanilla buttercream. That'll be the cream portion of our raspberries and cream macarons. So we're gonna start in our bowl with 4 tablespoons of room temperature butter and a cup of confectioner's sugar, and we'll start by mixing those together. then we are going to add in 3/4 teaspoon of vanilla extract. And we're gonna add in approximately a tablespoon of milk. And we're gonna do it a teaspoon at a time so that the consistency is what we want. Because you can always add, but you can't take it out. And I know you might be looking at it right now going, that's not a ton of buttercream, but you really don't need a lot for each one of these sandwiches, so this will be the perfect amount to fill them all. I filled our pastry bag with our vanilla buttercream and just cut a tiny hole. You don't need a tip on it because we're just gonna squish it and make a little sandwich. So we're just gonna squeeze a tiny little dollop, and you don't need to fill the whole center of it because again, it's gonna squish down. Now that all of our bottom halves have their filling, we're just gonna make little sandwiches. So, and you wanna be very gentle as you press down because macarons are extremely delicate. So just gently top them. Our macarons are all put together and plated up. I'm gonna take one now. I gotta figure out which one I want. They all look so good. Let's go with this little guy back here. They are a lot of work, totally worth it. If you like this recipe and more, make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Center Stage Sweets, and for more recipes and baking tips, head to centerstagesweets.com. We'll see you next time.